This is Ready, Set, Renovate, a podcast delivering renovation inspiration and motivating you to put your home beautifying ideas into motion. We're discussing the topic of matchmaking. Yes, you heard correctly, matchmaking. Clients want to find the right renovation contractor. And trust me, renovation contractors definitely want to find the right clients. Shawn Van Dyke is quite familiar with what it takes to be the right renovation contractor. Shawn founded the Built to Build Academy to equip contractors to create robust businesses. He's authored 2 books, Profit First for Contractors and The Paperwork Punch List. Rob Young of Heritage Custom Builders also joins us to discuss the contractor-client relationship. Let's get to it. The idea for this podcast came from the gentleman to my right here, Rob Young. He is actually someone who works with Shawn Van Dyke, who we have joining us today. And Rob recommended that we get in touch with you, Shawn, get you on the podcast. He indicated it was probably a long shot, but worth taking. And certainly glad that you were willing to come on and talk with us today. Thank you.
Oh man, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. I don't know what Rob was talking about being a long shot.
Celebrity status.
Well, yeah, he's like, this dude has tens of thousands of followers. But yeah, it's an honor. Thank you for being here. The topic we're going to delve into on this episode is making a good relationship between builder and client, creating a good relationship, and what to do to avoid bad relationships, what to do to avoid bad contractors or bad clients. It's a two-way street between client and contractor. And I thought you would be a good person to speak to that, simply because you've dedicated your career to helping builders be the best version of themselves, helping builders to be really, really good at what they do. And if you follow the logic, if they're that way, they'll attract really, really good clients typically and avoid really, really bad clients. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole mission statement of the Built to Build Academy is that we want to create confident construction business owners, and we believe that you deserve to be as confident in your business as you are at your craft. So that's where a lot of them struggle. And if we can increase the confidence on the business, and I'm a systems nerd, so we go deep into systems, and communication with clients is probably the biggest system that a lot of contractors struggle with, because it's not just the way we look at it. It's not just communication. Oh, I talked to them. I told them I said this thing. That's not really a system. So helping them understand and putting systems in place to, create, attract, and produce really good clients.
How would you, right out of the gate, what system would you put in place so that a builder can avoid a bad relationship or a client that just wouldn't be worth pursuing? What is it that you do to make sure that doesn't happen, that bad relationship doesn't go further than it has to?
I always take it to the very start of the business, and you heard me say this a lot before, that you have to sell something in order to be in business. It's the exchange of money that creates that transaction. And congratulations, you're now in business. Now, whether you're making any money at that transaction or not, that's yet to be determined. But it's the sales process. And then what I find a lot of builders, and even a lot of business owners in general, is once you make the sale and you start producing the work, the product, the service, when surprises come up, then that means that surprises from the client, they get surprised by something you're doing. It means that you skip something in the sales process. So, for example, hey, we get really excited. We're going to build this project. We're going to do this thing, and here's some money, and now let's get started. And then, changes happen, and they always happen. And then, bam, the client gets surprised. Well, what do you mean we got to do a change order? Or you require us to pay for the change change order beforehand. They get surprised. Maybe it's part of your process, but it means you didn't go over it during the sales process.
Right. So you're setting expectations right out of the gate as to how everything's going to go.
Creating clarity and expectations. He's right. It goes a long way. We're right in the middle of a scenario now where I'm having to replace $20,000 with a railing because I assumed it was going to be black, and she wanted white, literally. And she was surprised that we installed a black railing. So if I would have communicated just one little word, we could have foregone that entire confrontation.
That
It's right on
experience.
the end of a job. You know, it's been a year. Everybody's tired and just kind of spent.
And she envisioned white, and
she didn't communicate white. So it's a two-sided thing. So she didn't communicate. I didn't ask, and I didn't communicate.
And as builders, sometimes we don't know to ask because every railing we've ever done in our career is black, so we don't even know to ask it. And what I teach contractors is, hey, when your customer's surprised, you skip something. Now, you may not, Rob's probably not wrong in that, but that's part of the feedback loop to say, like, oh, the customer, maybe they're wrong, but most likely we could have at least made it a little bit more right if we covered it. So going forward, my guess is that from now on, Rob's always going to be like, black handrails, what was quoted. If you want something else, let us know. It's not Rob's fault, but it's like, hey, we always talked about identifying gaps in the system. And a lot of times when our customers get surprised, there's usually a gap there.
Yeah. There's a reason. Yeah. And to clarify, in that instance, that's not a troublesome client. That's just one who had another idea than you, right? That's not those are issues that, yes, are avoidable, but that doesn't indicate that she's a client that you would want to avoid altogether.
No, and a lot of that goes right back to the very beginning, because I did a very good job of communicating and setting expectations, clarifying things, creating dialogue in the front end. And, you know, it's a year-long $1 million remodel. So we've had time to exercise communication throughout the entire project. So when this happened, it was just kind of like, oh, well, we need to just talk about this because this is not what I expected and nobody asked me, which is surprising because you've asked me, you know, everything else along the way.
Well, let's hone in on that.
Yeah.
So the early stages of this relationship, client contractor relationship, what is it that you're looking for out of a client, and what is it that you consider just, you know, this just is not worth pursuing?
So where Shawn and I kind of started our journey together, kind of on the front end side, and Shawn will laugh at this, but this pre-construction concept, and I thought it was crazy. Nobody does that. But when Shawn convinced me that was, you know, the right way to do things, and it kind of communicated to potential clients that, you know, I value myself, I value my time, and I am an expert, and I am a professional. And if you want my input on this project, there is a contract and there is money involved.
Was that a tough sell for a lot of people to?
I thought everybody was crazy for a long time. I was not a proponent of it. But once I did it, I finally felt like I was in control of that process, or that sales process, which has been very elusive forever. I mean, I've been working for the general public for, 25 years for free.
Providing a lot of good information.
It's crazy, but just going through the exercise of them agreeing to do a pre-construction, just kind of starts communicating those expectations from the very beginning, and actually puts me in the driver's seat of controlling that that whole
relationship.
process,
Yeah.
that whole relationship.
Well, is that something, Shawn, that you do for all contractors that you recommend highly, the pre-construction agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether they're general contractors, remodelers, even service-based contractors, it's all the same. Meaning, if we're professionals and someone calls us up and can say, "Hey, I want this project." I don't care if it's a small bathroom remodel to a $6 million custom home. If that's the clientele that you're serving, then you should be able to give them an estimate pretty quickly. And an estimate, as we define it, is a guess based on your experience. So with that, every contractor has different experience, so their estimate is going to be more or less accurate. But that's really all it is. And what I always tell people is, contractors, we're just so familiar with the work. That's what we want to start talking about. But the sales process is not about selling the work, it's about selling the process.
Mhm.
Do you want to get on board with the process that's going to produce the product at the end? We can get to the product, it's not a problem. It's just, how difficult do you want it to be to get to that product? So before I start talking about the specifics of what they're going to get, I want to sell the process to get them there.
Yeah.
And if they agree to that, then the product comes a lot, I'm not going to say easier, but it's more simplified. Like Rob said at the beginning, there's a lot more clarity around it.
Well, where are contractors going astray? Where are they getting it wrong? Good contractors, where are their processes not what they should be? Does that make sense? So you're preaching process. For the general contractor out there, where's the weakness in that?
The weakness, and this is going to be weird to say, but I mean it as a compliment. Most general contractors or construction business owners are people pleasers. And I mean that as a compliment, because what they do is so difficult over a long period of time. It's one of the only professions, like, not only do you have to make the client happy and you got to deal with supply chain issues, we also have to deal with the weather. Like, the weather is now your fault, right? So there's all these,
you get blamed for it.
Yeah, you get blamed for it, or whatever. But in general, the good contractors are people pleasers, meaning they don't need a lot of applause, they don't need a lot of accolades, because they can stand back, look at the project that their hands and their efforts have produced, and they see a smiling face on their client, and that's all they really need. And so they really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Unfortunately, the sales process, the change order process, the selections, there's a lot of difficult conversations that have to happen, even with really good clients. And most contractors want to please people and saying, like, you know what, we can't move forward unless you sign this document. We can't move forward without payment. We can't do the other thing because you changed your mind. Those are all difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And they think that, well, I'll just work my way out of it and they'll be happy at the end, because, putting someone on notice that you have to stop work because X, Y, and Z, that's not fun. That's not enjoyable. And when you're at heart a really good person, you like to make people smile, then talking about change orders and schedules and the weather delays and things outside of your control, none of those conversations are fun. And so they stray away from that, thinking, well, we'll just work it. We'll work our way through it, and they'll be happy at the end, and they'll know how hard we're working. But
that rarely works out, though.
Well, and I tell contractors this all the time. Your clients don't love you as much as you love them.
And that's an interesting point. That's a really good observation. I think it's human nature to want to get as much as possible and give as little as possible when it comes to being a consumer, right? I mean, that's what we all want. But getting back to the client's role in all this, what should be a reasonable expectation for a client when it comes to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a renovation? Should they recognize, or will the good ones recognize these processes, or will they simply say that's unnecessary?
So what I have found, and I think it really has to do with your clientele. So our clientels are spending, hundreds, if not millions of dollars on a project. So most of these people are seasoned professionals. And so when
You're talking about clients?
yes.
Yeah.
So when I changed my process and I went in and I stopped, when you first meet a client, they want to show you the drawings and look at the project and talk about doors and talk about windows and talk about layout. When I stopped doing that and I started selling the process and just slowed it way down, they actually identified with a lot of it, simply because in their professions, most of them do sell a process too. And in most of their business, they get paid to do planning and developing for other companies. So they related to what I was connecting to with the process. And believe it or not, most of the good ones will actually sell my pre-construction to themselves.
As opposed to taking your services for granted, right? Like, I guess they're never going to see the value if you don't articulate the value. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. I always tell people, contractors that we work with, and I say, okay, well, one of the first questions I ask them is like, do you do pre-construction? Do you charge for your estimates, proposals? Again, there's always a little bit of friction around that word. And because a customer thinks that an estimate is professional services. That's what they should get for free. But I always ask, the contractors, if they're doing that, then who's really paying for that? Who's paying for that time? And one of the things that when that comes up is, the client might say, "Oh, well, you're going to charge me for this. Isn't that the cost of doing business?" I say, "Well, if I go and look at 10 projects and I don't charge for my time for any of that, and I get 3 of them, that's a 33% closing, or 30% closing rate. That's not too bad overall. But now I got to cover the cost of the 7 people that didn't hire me.
It took a lot of my time.
Well, what I'm saying is, then I say, well, who pays for that time? It's the 3 people that did hire
paid
you.
up, right?
Yes.
So
right.
I think that it's only fair to charge you for the time it takes to do your project, and not my ability or inability to sell somebody else. And so there's no doubt about it that selling, or I should say closing, happens emotionally. Like, we all buy based on emotion. So I want to get an emotional reaction from them, but that's based on logic, meaning we're going to provide this service and answer these questions and put the plan together and take you step by step, very logically, so that you can avoid the pain, the fear, the dread, the frustration, right? Logic, so that you can avoid this bad emotion. Do you want to get going?
Yeah.
And like Rob said, they will sell themselves on it because they're like, I don't want to feel that way. And that makes sense.
It's a process of building trust, right? I mean, you're doing everything, putting everything in place for them ultimately to entrust their home to you, right? As well as
trust is an interesting word.
Let's camp on that for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
So our tagline at Daniel Builders is building trust. Obviously, that's a key component in any relationship. If you don't have trust, it's going to be unproductive in a lot of ways. What is your take on trust, Shawn?
I'd say trust is earned based on the tracking. So you could come to me and say, "Hey, and again, look at all the work that we did, that we've done, talk to our other clients. We've been around. We have a great reputation. You should trust us." Okay, can you prove it? Can you prove why I should trust? Those are good words, and I can go do some research. And we're just kind of living through this right now. And I'm just really helping a lot of contractors don't pull the trust out too early, saying, hey, guess what? You actually don't have to trust me personally because everything's tracked. You can trust in the systems that we have.
Oh, yeah.
So our tracking will give you the evidence of why you should trust us. So for example, we do pre-construction. We're going to do A, B, and C. If we don't do B, you probably shouldn't trust us because that's what we said we were going to do. And I can show you, there's documents, I can point to something visually, or we can have other clients tell you their experience, and they're going to describe the system or as I say, the tracking part of it. That, yeah, I can certainly trust, so that when a change order comes up, if you've taken me through your system, the one that you sold me on, then I can trust that we're doing the right thing. But I think a lot of contractors pull trust out too early. Say, well, you should just trust us.
Asking for trust and not providing anything trustworthy.
It's all in the evidence. So, I kind of let other people speak when it comes to character. My reputation usually precedes us, but as far as, people want to know these things, or they'll ask you these questions, and I'm very quick to tell them, don't listen to me, because I think I'm great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to sell myself,
You need
right?
to ask some other people. And even with the referrals, I do things a little bit differently. Usually I'll give them the last 10 clients and just let them randomly pick. And I don't discriminate who's on the list. And there's probably some on there that we've had to grind some jobs out and had some conflict. But I just believe that we've done everything that we could, and we delivered a good product the way we said we were going to do it. And so even the tough clients that we've had our share of them, believe it or not, are still good references or referrals for our business.
Sometimes the hardest clients make the best salespeople in the end, if you can make them happy, because they're usually letting everybody know exactly how they feel, for better or worse.
Yeah.
Well, as far as this process of building trust, so yes, other people can give a testimony to how trustworthy or untrustworthy you are. But in those early stages, how are, you're mentioning you're laying out processes to build trust. Is there anything else you can do to convey to the client that they should feel comfortable in trusting their home into your care?
I think really it just starts with education, and meaning you have to educate the client on why they're a good client. And a lot of contractors don't really know, meaning they're a good client for us because they're giving us some money and they got a project. That doesn't necessarily, that's not going to make a great relationship. Now, we've all gone through those clients where, times get tough and we're like, hey, we need this project, we need to move forward, it's not the best, or okay, great, whatever, we all have to do that. But for the on the client side, I would just say, hey, let's go back to this process. Let me explain it to you and educate you on why we do it this way. There may be some options within that, but we're going to stick pretty close to this process because we know that it's going to serve you. Now, you may not like it, but that's where we say, but we're professionals here. If I let you jump ahead, you haven't picked out, the windows, and we got to get the place right. And you're talking about paint colors and cabinets. Trust me, the foundation is really important right now, because we got to order, like, paint colors. That's way down the line. We got to keep our clients in line, and they'll always want to jump ahead.
Yeah.
And when they jump ahead, they're going to leave gaps along the way. And if you let them jump ahead, they're going to drag you through everything. And then it just becomes a chaotic mess.
Then you really start to lose trust, right?
Yeah. So we got to educate them on why. Hey, I know especially with supply chain issues over the past couple of years and all that kind of stuff. I always say, when the world changes, change your business. Meaning, like, last year we weren't ordering windows at this point, but now, windows were 3-6 months out, or we don't even know if we can get them. So we've got to make that decision now. And hey, it's new for us too. And I always tell my clients this: when you're doing something new, you guys say, this is new. We'll probably screw it up. We'll definitely get it wrong, but we'll figure it out. So I need some feedback here. And part of educating them on saying, we don't know everything, but here's how when we get the information, here's how we're going to process it. Mm-hmm. So education, I think, is big to educating them on the process, letting them know where where it's going to be kind of painful and frustrating. And then when that pain and that frustration comes up and you said, yeah, remember when we talked about this, and this is how we're going to walk through it. Then they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. I can trust this guy because he's doing exactly what he said.
Your trust equity starts to rise at that point.
Yeah. And it's transparency. I had a conversation with a young builder just last night where he had installed some posts, some straight up from the logging mill, haven't been kiln dried or anything. And I said, it's great. They look beautiful and they're very rustic and knotty and cool. But I said, just need to have a conversation with the client today about when they turn their heat on, and these things are going to twist and they're going to pop and they're going to crack and they're going to move, and it's going to happen.
They're about to become very rustic.
Yeah. But you have a wonderful opportunity here to just let them know that it's going to happen. So when it does happen, it changes the conversation down the road. They're not going to call you up and say, you got to come replace all these now. They're going to say, hey, listen,
you told us.
Yeah, you told us this was going to happen, and it happened, and we're really not happy. Or we love it even more. Some people love that.
It is more rustic. Yeah. Well,
so that's the building the trust thing, and even
so not withholding bad news obviously is a key component to building trust.
And Rob's heard me say this a lot. I said the kindest thing you can do for somebody is tell them the truth.
Be direct. Love them enough to be direct.
Hey, this is a great look right now. It's very rustic. It's about to get more rustic. Let me tell you the truth. The truth is these things are going to twist and warp and crack, and you may not be happy with them. And the only alternative to making sure that end result doesn't happen is a much more expensive post that we can dress up and make it look rustic, but it's going to be laminated lumber, not this solid thing. And it's 3 times as expensive. And they're going to be looking at that thing right there and say, well, they don't understand. This is the education part. They don't understand where it's going to go, but sometimes that's all you can do. And then when they the thing happens, if you've educated them and they trust you, they'll, could call back up and say, gosh, Rob, you were right. Mm-hmm. And now it's way more expensive, but they trust that the solution they're about to pay you double or triple for, because now it's way more expensive, that you're not going to spend a dime more on that repair because you told them about that a long time ago.
Built some credibility there.
Yeah.
Changing gears a little bit, I'm curious, Shawn, are you a proponent of a fixed cost price or cost plus? How do you consult builders, or do you go in both directions sometimes?
Well, it's funny that you asked that. I was teaching a Builder 20 group on systems earlier this week, and a guy had seen one of my YouTube videos where I was a big proponent of fixed costs. The reason I liked fixed costs is because there's inherently more risk for the builder, and where there is more risk, there is more money. If I'm willing to take on the risk, I will make more money. And I'm a business person and I like to make money. And again, some people are going to hear that, but I've also said, at builders, you should be making as much money as possible. Now, the Bible says it's the love of money is the root of all evil, not money. Mm-hmm. And so I want to, when I say I want to take on more risk and mitigate my risk and get the margin or the reward for that risk, it's so that I can make a lot of money so that I can do some great things with it. That's, me personally.
How does it? Can you speak a little bit to how it does provide more reward financially to go that fixed cost route?
Well, it's just because you control it. Like if
margins,
you just have margins.
margins.
Yeah, you get the margins. You
Right.
say, okay, let me figure out how much this is going to cost me, and then I'm going to sell the price, whatever price I determine for that. And if I sell it, it's really no business of the owner because they bought the price and the scope of work. But let me back up and say that was before the world changed. So in this Builder 20 group, a guy said, we do cost plus, and I know you're not a big fan of that. And I said, well, why do you think I'm not a big fan of that? Well, you talk a lot about fixed price and all of that. And I said, I reserve the right to change my mind when the world changes.
There you go. Yeah.
So
It's very fluid.
So with that, I like to determine the risk I can mitigate.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to take on, and whatever that is. So I think that cost plus is fine. I think a lot of builders don't actually understand what cost plus is. So I think nowadays it's more like a hybrid model.
It's a hybrid.
I want to quote what I can quote so I can maximize my margins.
Right.
So yes, I can make as much money as possible so that I can use that for my employees and grow my business and affect my community. That's what money is about for me, is making it, a change for the people around me. Now, some people want money for the sake of money, that no problem. But I think it's a hybrid model. And when I say that, is like you used to be able to quote lumber.
Yeah.
Lumber's now an allowance.
Yeah. So we've dropped several things down into that allowance category. Framing lumber used to be one of them. It's kind of stabilized now a little bit. But you could flip the coin on that too. You can sell both sides of this. Guys who have very narrow margins are going to want to drop a lot of things down into the allowance category. The builders who have a healthier margin can price those things out and have a realistic expectation of where they're going to be, and then lock them in. When we've done that in the past and they've come back down, we've done really well, which is probably made up for the times that we didn't do so well.
Yeah.
Which I think is the rationale or the reasoning, the psyche behind those who do this cost plus method is, hey,
cost
I
is
want to get into the
subjective
job.
and plus is subjective. And that's the
right.
problem with that, my experience, because I've done both of them, over almost 20 something, 30 years. I've spent the first probably 10 years of my business doing nothing but cost plus. So cost can be subjective. I literally had a client that would go through my invoices. We submitted a cover sheet with the actual invoices photocopied. This is back in the day when you had to photocopy everything.
What's that?
Yeah. So, but he would sit down at that little table outside with me on Friday mornings and go through those things. And he would identify, an Ace Hardware store where I had purchased screws. Now, keep in mind, I've already purchased the screws for that price. We've already installed the screws. He would literally figure out where he could buy those screws for 50 cents a box cheaper, deduct that off my invoice, and deduct whatever, I think I was charging 20% back then, and deducted 20%. So I actually lost money on that job because he
took control, right?
He was I was young. I didn't know any better, and it was my first real big job. And he taught me a good lesson, that, when you do on cost plus, you have a responsibility to the client. It's not the cheapest price, but you have to have a very efficient price for them.
Yeah. I always say with cost plus, here's what you should be. You should be auditable.
Yeah.
If I'm doing cost plus, again, back to the risk, what I'm telling the owner is you're going to I shouldn't say save some money. This project is going to cost less because you're taking on some of the risk. Meaning, whatever the price is, when we're done, you're going to pay it. That I'm willing to do that. That's basically what that agreement is.
Yeah.
And the project will be done when it's done.
Yeah.
If you want to, now the problem is we have to estimate and develop some budgets and give those budgets to clients, and they look at that and they say, okay, great, let's move forward. They sign a cost plus contract. And then I always say, like, take the budget and throw it away, because it's a cost plus. It's the cost and the plus, but they're always going to go back to that. And that's fine, as long as you can prove, back to the systems, the tracking, as long as you can prove that, yes, your lumber package, when we quoted it or when we put it in the budget, was $100,000, and what that was based on. And now things outside of our control, it's now 150.
Went up. Yeah.
Because it's auditable. The problem that you get into is, say, oh, my electrical budget that we based this cost plus contract on was $12,000. Now the work is going in and it's done and it's $20,000. And you say, well, it's just a natural question. And it could be like, yep, price went up. As the builder, I think you should say, like, hey, by the way, we're going to exceed this budget, and here's why. Let's do some projections. And instead of work going in place and now it's 20,000, it was based on 12.
Surprise element.
Yeah.
But the big problem is when you go back to that $12,000 and say, how did you come up with that? And there was nothing there. There's no
traceable.
Yeah. Hey, the last 5 projects based on square footage, or we've used this subcontractor based on the number of whatever. As long as you're auditable. Now, a lot of contractors are thinking, no way can I do that. And so you're going to go down that very painful path eventually if you can't prove that.
Let me ask this question. So if you're doing fixed cost, do you tell a client up front, you can expect so many change orders to happen through the course of this project? Because by now, as contractors, we know inevitably the projects that are likely going to be change order heavy, right? I mean, we can kind of spot them in a distance.
I have it. There's just no telling that, we have one client. I think I'm on my 37th change order. So, and we have other clients that sign one or two.
You're saying that you didn't see that coming in any way, shape, or form.
I have no idea what they're going to do. So there again, it gets back to the first process of the pre-construction and going through drawings and asking questions and having answers and talking about black handrails instead of white handrails. A lot of those changes happen because you haven't asked questions in the very beginning. You haven't done that first process very, very well. So, and even when you do, so we did our process very well. They just come up with new things like, let's add a fireplace in the backyard, or, hey, listen, we want to put a basketball goal up, or we want to do this and we want to trellis. And, all these things are new, that there was no way of planning on the very beginning, even when you have an architect involved. But I don't have a magic ball anymore when it comes to change orders. So
what do you think, Shawn? Should you be able to anticipate clients that are going to likely be change order heavy, or is it just you're flying blind?
There's a system for it. and what it's a very simple system is when you sign the contract, there's the contract amount. And then when you're done with the contract, there's the actual finished amount. The difference between those will give you a percentage. So as you do more and more projects, you just, hey, we signed the contract for this amount, go and do the work. And then somebody needs to plug in the number at the end. And after you build up a database of that, we're talking very simple numbers. Yeah. When I'm selling the next project, and I'm talking about budget, and we're talking about estimated costs, all of the stuff in the pre-construction, and say, okay, great. We've landed, this is about a $500,000 project for what we know now. Then I'm going to pull out my database sheet, a rolling 12-month history of the past clients, and said, now let's plan for the change orders we know are going to come up.
Yeah. Rather be 10%.
Oh my gosh, I would not spend, we're not going to spend 30% more.
Yeah.
Cool. You're going to be the one client out of all clients that didn't change it. And again, this is, you don't have to trust us. I'm showing you the data.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that. So if you truly only have $500,000, we've got the information. It's very easy. Now, I'm not going to show any, proprietary information. I'm just going to make a cheat sheet for my clients to say, look at this rolling 12-month history of projects. You can see percentages grow between 17.5% to 32.75. I want it to be that exact, to say, we're not making this up. You don't have to do this because you like me. I'm telling you the truth. And if it's truly a $500,000 project, and in general, based on these averages, 27.5% is going to grow, we need to shoot for a $432,000 project. So when we add, and I'm just making up numbers in my head now, the 27.5%, we're right at $500,000.
That's good.
We're not,
that's really
we're not
good.
making it. And every contractor can do that if they just plug in the contract amount and the final amount, put it on a spreadsheet, and then make it a marketing piece during the sales conversation and hand it to them and say, so $500,000 is going to grow to 550. If you're not going to spend it, let's plan for a 425 so we can leave you some room. And it's based on data, because you're just like your special client. We want to make them feel special, but in general, they're just like everybody else. Now, the problem with doing that and being able to do it is contractors doing too many different types of projects. So if I'm doing a lot of outdoor spaces or a lot of specialty high-end work, I need to separate out those projects, because those projects are going to have their own nuances. Does that make sense? So I got to look at my remodel projects versus my custom, and then the ones that we say, like, these are like super tricky. So I only might have like 4 data points for my super tricky ones, but I still want to separate them out. So,
it's a different animal.
I got an overall picture for everything that we do and how much they grow, and then I can split those out into the category that I think that this project is.
That's good stuff. Really good stuff. I wanted to read this proverb. I turn to Proverbs a lot for wisdom, and even though it was written a couple thousand years ago, there's still so much relevant wisdom there. And this, I think, applies really well to the builder. It says, do not go hastily to argue your case, otherwise what will you do in the end when your neighbor humiliates you? And I'm basically there talking about if you can stay out of a toxic situation that ends up in court, by all means, take the route. Don't go to court. Argue your case with your neighbor and do not reveal the secret of another. So how to maintain, or how to wisely handle a situation that could be volatile enough that ends up in a courtroom. Can you speak to that a little bit, Shawn, as far as coaching goes?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of tell your listeners, I mean, I'm in that situation right now. We're actively in a lawsuit with the builder, and so it's interesting to go to do what it is that I do, and then to end up where we're at. Certainly nobody wins when it goes to court.
It's
the only people that make money are the only people that win are the attorneys. So but as far as like how to avoid, it's hard to say how to avoid it, because you can get to that point through no fault of your own, or maybe a big fault of your own.
It can either be a death of 1,000 cuts, or it can be one catastrophic thing that happened somewhere along the job. I could tell you what I've done that's helpful, because I had a time to reflect back, and early in my career there was conflict, and I had an attorney on retainer, and I knew him way too well. But if I had to honestly look back and examine, what could I have done better not to get in those situations? And it's going to go right back to the front, to the selling part, finding the right client. During that planning and development, talking about conflict, talking about how you want to resolve conflict, letting them know that you are going to make mistakes along the way, but you're going to, respond well and take care of those things. But I've even changed the language in my contract now to saying, you know what, if there is a dispute, we have to be locked in a room for 30 minutes. It's literally that elementary. It says, there's a mandatory 30 minutes in a room, no phones. And I honestly believe, if I look back at the last 3 or 4 conflicts I had years ago, if I just had 30 minutes in a room with them
to sort it out
versus them taking a shot at me taking a stab at them and walking out and saying, well, okay, let's go sue them. And once you start that, there's no putting that toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. My advice there for contractors, and I would do this immediately. Every state is a little bit different, but record everything. Trust me, record every conversation. And if I had employees on, I want them logging in and logging out of every job every day, because when it goes to court, again, it's not even getting to court. Very few things actually get to court. That's the whole purpose of a lot of stuff beforehand, which is fine. Which is fine. But when it comes down to all of that, everyone's preparing for the court, hoping no one actually gets there. If you show up with the most documentation, it's going to be a lot better for you and your side, and it's just easier to prepare. Right. I would record every conversation with every client. I would have cameras. Again, I'm serious.
Yeah, I know.
Because when he says, "Oh, we were there, we weren't there," when it comes down to it, someone's going to say, "Okay, great. Can you prove it?" And if you can't prove it, then it's really doesn't have. So, but it's so easy to document things. And part of that is I would have my employees, obviously, you got time cards and all that. But I would make it policy that everything is recorded, every conversation with a client and a contractor, to serve you both, to say, hey, if we get in, like what Rob said, let's get into the room for 30 minutes. And the first thing you can do is that thing that we talked about. We know when we talked about it, let's bring up the recording and see if we're forgetting something.
Yeah.
And that's going to cover a lot.
Yeah.
It's just this new set of disciplines. We rely heavily on construction management software and changing the discipline from just random text messaging to actually going through the messaging on Buildertrend, and having shared files and documents. Like my black and white hand railing. I had the documents and I had phone conversations with her. But I can't find where I sent her the documents. So, and she can't find them. So I forgot. But if I had gone and stuck with my discipline of downloading those into the Buildertrend, into the shared owner's file, it would have been real easy for me to pull back and say, we shared this information with you. You didn't do anything with it, or you didn't view it. I can pull up some clients in their portal page, and every message and every document is left unread.
They're not even tuning in. Huh?
But that's important too, because when it comes down to it, a lot of times when we get into disagreements or even arguments with our clients, we start arguing with them in the position that they are, meaning they're a client, they're a person. You are a professional. Guess what? There's more responsibility on you. Again, this is not legal advice, and I'm not an attorney, but as a professional builder, someone's if it goes to court or whatever, they're like, yeah, they're the client. They shouldn't have known that. You're the professional person.
Yeah.
And if their side can produce some experts that say, in general, this is a professional practice. It may not be written down anywhere. You didn't check some certification off when you got your license or whatever, but you as a professional have the responsibility of knowing certain stuff. And
Well, on that topic, Shawn, what is a reasonable level of communication? Obviously, you're saying written, verbal, documented. When can you say, I feel like I've substantially communicated this and I can now turn my attention to something else?
I mean, these days it's every communication. Like it meaning, hey, if they're going to send me text messages, I've got to respond to them and say, please don't do that. You need to go through our client portal. And they're going to text and say, I will take this message and I will post it in there on your behalf. But and they do it again, I'm going to say the same thing. And then I'm going to go say, hey, let me train you on this.
So let me ask it this way. Do you follow up every conversation with an email with written documentation?
No, but I should.
Or is that what
it's the discipline? It's learning the discipline and taking the time to do those things. We honestly don't. We respond with phone calls, with in-person meetings, and we just do things. But boy, it would be helpful just to go through the practice of, hey, had a great time meeting you at the job. We're gonna change that black hand railing to white. Thanks for letting us know. Or just a short little email saying, hey, listen, this is my takeaway from our last conversation. You don't necessarily have to dictate out or quote out the conversation, but just your understanding or your takeaway from it that says you're going to go do this because of that conversation.
That's right. So
give them a time to say, yes, you got that right, or you screwed that all up. We got to have that conversation again.
And I'm telling you, so for people that are listening to this saying like, this is crazy. Like, that's like, who has time to do that? You don't have the time when it goes that route. But trust me, when I can drop into my cell phone. Now, again, there's some convenience there to say, like, I can see when I had conversations from my cell phone on day, time, and the length of the call. And now I can go to the platform and I can say, we had this phone conversation and then this communication was written down. So I can show the data points, and in general, the person that doesn't have any of that versus the one who has the bits and pieces, they'll be like, okay, this person is, especially if it's he said sort of thing. He said this thing happened. Can you prove it? No. I'm saying another thing happened, and I can show you this phone conversation that we had led to this communication that was written down.
Right.
Well, that seems reasonable that that's probably what happened. And so I would, if I had a phone call, I'd get some software that records all of my phone calls. So I don't have to worry about the documentation. It just happens automatically. Or like we're saying, when you receive a communication, if it's not through the way that you've designed it, you let them know and you put it in there. And then eventually you have to stop communicating with them through there and only leave that. And because like what Rob was saying, or maybe what you said, Will, when they show that you've been communicating through that way and those things are unread, you can say, well, we did our part. We can't.
I can't make you read a document.
That's right.
That's on them. Unfortunately, the clients that you have to kind of hammer this home to, you also have to be right when you address them with conflict and saying, hey, listen, we told you it was going to be black. And once you do this, hopefully you've got a well enough relationship that the client doesn't respond poorly, because then they just start attacking you.
Thinking emotionally.
So there's just, you have to learn how to kind of ride that wave out and do it fairly. But
it goes to protect you as the builder. To protect the client too, to say, hey, we record all this because we're probably going to mess up.
Oh, I forget things all the time.
And if we do, I would love to have a way that my client can could say like, hey, by the way, you said you were going to do this and you did something else. And
I
you
would just
might be
like to
able
remember
oh,
myself.
yeah.
I mean, at my old age, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And you just sometimes have to humble yourself and say,
I
you were
forgot.
right. I did
Every
forget.
week I got to go to a client and say, we have all these quick conversations on the jobs, and I said, I honestly forgot what did we decide to do here? Remind me.
Yep.
And we have some fun with it, but honestly, I wish I could have somebody video recording a lot of
Everything.
things.
Yeah, walk around with a GoPro.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
Shawn, this has been a wealth of good information, both for contractor and client alike, to get educated on. We're really grateful that you took out some time to talk to us. Can you tell contractors how they can get in touch with you if they are interested in the consultation that you provide, the coaching you provide?
Yeah, so they can follow me on Instagram. I hang out there a lot and post a lot of stuff there. So it's just Shawn Van Dyke on Instagram, and that's SHAWN. They can check out my website at ShawnVanDyke.com, or if they're interested in our coaching programs, they can go to builttobuildacademy.com and grab one of our programs there. They can sign up for whatever we got launching next, whenever this thing is out, or you can send me an email anytime at connect@ShawnVanDyke.com. And I read all my own emails. So
it does. It's true. Yeah.
Well, and I know Rob can vouch for the services and the value of what you provide. Great episode, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of it.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This was awesome.
We're delighted you tuned in for today's episode of Ready, Set, Renovate, your guide design build resource. Are you ready for your home to undergo a transformation? We'd love to talk to you about it. Visit us at danielbuilders.com and tell us about the home renovation you envision. In the meantime, subscribe to Ready, Set, Renovate, and we'll keep the renovation inspiration coming.